Ladies and gentlemen, if you're a Cardano fan or you're looking to learn about the project, this is the video for you. We're going to be going over the roadmap for Cardano in 2020 and beyond, and really tell you what you can expect from the project going forward. So without further ado, let's hash it out. The brains behind Cardano have architected a really clear and well-defined plan on how to get the network as close as possible to the complete decentralized vision that they had for it in the very beginning. And this roadmap is really composed of 5 main eras, if you will, or 5 main milestones that we're going to talk about today, one of which is already completed and the rest of them are in progress, and we're going to see those come out within this year, 2020, and maybe 2021. So I wanted to share with you what each of those different milestones are and where we're going in the Cardano ecosystem today. Now, the coolest part is that each of these milestones has its own story or its own ethos related to a historical figure in the past. So as each of these new features comes out and they're developed, there's also a double meaning behind all the names of the milestones, which I find really fun, and Cardano is one of the projects that has cool stories behind every name in their platform. So let's dive into all the milestones. The whole Cardano journey really started with the first developer milestone that's called Byron. And Byron brought the whole mainnet blockchain, so that's that base blockchain protocol that we have, that's a UTXO blockchain. If you don't know what a UTXO is, check out this video right here linked above. You can pause this one. Byron itself as a development milestone was completed in 2018, and it brought the dataless wallet, the Yoroi mobile wallet, and the main blockchain network with the cryptocurrency ADA. Now, ADA is the main cryptocurrency in the Cardano ecosystem, and it will be as this network develops over time. So just keep that in mind. Byron was very much the foundation on which all of the new updates with proof of stake, so on and so forth, that we'll talk about in the rest of this video were built on top of. Then comes the issue of naming and why this is even called Byron. It seems like a very random name at the end of the day. Well, Byron, the development milestone in Cardano, was actually named after Lord George Byron, who was the father of Ada Lovelace, who was a famous mathematician in the 19th century. Ada Lovelace herself was often credited with being the first person to postulate or hypothesize about the true power of computers in terms of making more complex decisions and computing more complex things than just simple arithmetic and math. Ada Lovelace is also often credited with being the first person to write an algorithm that was ever used on a computer, ever solved by a computer. She's kind of a big deal. And so at the end of the day, there's a lot of symbolism in the name Byron as the first development sprint or milestone for Cardano. As you might remember from just a minute ago, the main cryptocurrency on Cardano is called ADA, and Lord George Byron was Ada Lovelace's father. So if you really think about it, naming this development sprint that brought the blockchain to life really gave rise and birthed the ADA cryptocurrency. So there's a lot of symbolism at play here, and the whole story behind it is always really, really interesting to learn about. So the way that I remember it is the Byron milestone gave rise to the ADA cryptocurrency, and in real life, Lord George Byron was the person who gave rise to and gave birth to, well, not literally, but gave birth to Ada Lovelace, whom the cryptocurrency behind Cardano is named. And things get even more interesting because the second development milestone in Cardano is called Shelly. And Lord George Byron was actually best friends in real life with the namesake of this second milestone. So let's talk about it. So Shelly, which is the second development milestone, which began in 2017 with Byron and has continued work up until today. It's actually pending release soon. The target release date for all the Shelly development updates are towards the end of 2019, maybe early 2020. That remains to be seen. Everything's in testnet now, so we'll see how that goes. The Shelly updates are bringing all of the core changes that will bring more decentralization and better scalability to the network. Right now, many of the nodes that run and compose the Cardano blockchain, that's the Byron UTXO blockchain, are owned by Cardano team members and people who are really close to the project. The idea here is that we want to incentivize more people that are just from the community, from the outside world, to create nodes to make the network more secure and to make the network more decentralized. And you also want to move to a proof of stake environment that is much more energy efficient and where you can reach consensus in an incentivized way. Shelley is also bringing the technological capacity for the incentives and delegation processes within the network. Essentially, this allows participants in the network to stake their ADA coins for participation in the network, whether that be voting for block makers, whether that be locking up stake to vote for a community proposal. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. Now, this delegation and staking scheme or process is really designed to allow people to stake their ADA cryptocurrency on staking pools, which are essentially community-run nodes that are always on and always running and always supporting the network. And by staking in these stake pools, it both secures the network, helps the network move forward, and allows people to earn cryptocurrency in the process by staking their ADA on these staking pools. So basically, it's setting up an incentive structure for people to participate in the network and to participate in a positive manner. And that's very important, obviously, to any blockchain protocol, incentivizing good behavior, disincentivizing bad behavior. So Shelley is bringing all of that, a proof of stake environment with delegation, with staking, and ultimately with a whole entire incentive structure to participate in the network. And while I couldn't find any original sources that talked about the origin story behind the name Shelley for this update, I have a theory of my own. I believe that Shelley, the development milestone, is actually named after an 1800s poet, a famous one at that, named Percy Shelley. Percy Shelley's literary works about the economy, about morality, about nonviolent resistance or protest to oppression really inspired many people after Shelley's time. Shelley often placed a focus on decentralized and non-oppressive control of power and economy in his literary works, which I think makes perfect sense as an inspiring name for the Shelley updates, which bring proof of stake and a lot of decentralizing and incentive structure to the Cardano blockchain. And as I alluded to before, Shelley himself was a friend in real life of Lord George Byron, the namesake for the first development milestone. So we've got a whole concrete story kind of flowing together here when we talk about the first and second development milestones. Now, the goal of the Shelley updates to Cardano are to incentivize the community to create their very own nodes, to take ownership of network operations, and to move away from this sort of federated structure that we see on the Cardano blockchain today, with a lot of team members within IOHK and Cardano being very heavily in the network themselves. Now, this is also to make the network a little bit more power efficient, which is a common criticism of other proof of work driven UTXO blockchains. So obviously, proof of work has its merit. It is important in Bitcoin. It is paramount, but other networks have other processes, and that does not mean that they are bad. So everyone who says UTXO and POW are the only way, that's not necessarily the case. So this update is right now open on testnet and is due to be completed the end of this year or early 2020. On to the next one. Now, the third development milestone in the Cardano ecosystem is called Gogan, and it's been in development since 2017, and we have a pending delivery date of early 2020 to mid 2020. I think it's going to be closer to mid 2020 or the end, but that's just my opinion. Now, the Gogan updates will bring full support for smart contracts, virtual machine, and just the ability to interact with the Cardano blockchain in a more meaningful programmatic way. The introduction of smart contracts and a capable virtual machine into the Cardano blockchain will be essential in creating meaningful decentralized applications on the Cardano blockchain, but also gives the ability for people and companies to create their very own tokens, like ERC20 tokens on Ethereum, on the Cardano blockchain itself. The introduction of this smart contract language, which is called Plutus, a functional language based on Haskell. I have a whole video about Plutus right here. If you're curious, pause this video and give that one a watch if so. The introduction of that smart contract language really sent waves throughout the community within the Cardano world, and rightly so. The Plutus smart contract language is due to improve on all the things that the Solidity programming language within Ethereum didn't do so well, and also take some of the benefits in the things that Solidity did really well. And this programming language is really going to change the game for Cardano. I believe that having a good scripting language and the ability to create custom applications on top of your blockchain is essential to adoption when you are placed like Cardano is. Cardano is not designed to be an massive value driving token. The ADA token is not designed to be $1 million. This is a completely different beast than Bitcoin is. This blockchain network is designed to be useful and to run business operations, to run decentralized applications, to help people interact with each other programmatically and otherwise. Keep that in mind. The Gogan updates are actually named after a world-renowned computer scientist named Joseph Gogan, whose work inspired an entire generation of computer scientists and programmers after his time. May he rest in peace. Gogan's work inspired all sorts of different frameworks and languages, like the K framework, which is a framework that the Cardano folks themselves use to build their virtual machine. Now, these developments that Gogan made really helped lead to where we are today with Cardano's new language in Plutus and their non-programmers language called Marlowe, which will allow financial analysts and other people to create their very own smart contracts without programming experience, which is super, super cool. So Gogan really inspired these updates, and hence it's named after the guy himself. Thank you very much, Joseph Gogan, for all the work that you did during your life. Now, the fourth milestone in Cardano's development is called Basho. Bear with me now, Basho. This development sprint kicked off this year in 2019, if you're watching this in 2020, last year. And the development is set to move into the end of 2020, probably early 2021, if you ask me. Again, that's my opinion. This set of updates called Basho are all about scalability. It's all about making the network more scalable. We talk about this all the time, especially when it comes to Ethereum 2.0. How are these blockchains going to scale? Well, this is Cardano's idea for how it's going to scale. The Byron era brought the core UTXO blockchain and the ADA cryptocurrency. And then Shelly is going to bring all of these proof of stake changes to the way consensus is driven and the way that nodes are incentivized and people are incentivized to participate. Now, the Basho updates are going to basically take that same structure that we have when the Shelly updates come out and break it up into mini blockchains in a structure called sharding. So instead of having one main blockchain where all the transactions are fed through in one pipeline, rather you'll have multiple blockchains that settle their own groups of transactions and then feed the state of those transactions to a main blockchain. The main blockchain is often called the beacon chain or called the main chain, and the others are called sidechains. This is a common mechanism by which people are thinking we can scale blockchains, and Cardano is trying to do the same thing. There's also a lot of conversation about the Basho updates bringing the ability to have multiple different types of sidechains where you could have a UTXO-based sidechain and an account-based sidechain. So there are two different types of blockchain, a UTXO like Bitcoin and an account-based model like Ethereum. This one kind of scares me a little bit because I'm not sure how you can effectively manage that, having multiple different types of accounting on a blockchain and sharing state to a main chain consistently. But if they can figure it out, it'd be great for interoperability, so we shall see. The detailed technical specs of the Basho updates are still in flux and still changing, even though the work has already kicked off in the preliminary stages. And I would expect things to be coming out in a faster fashion after Shelly gets out the door and we're really in the Gogan era of development coming to a close, so keep your eyes peeled for that. The name Basho is actually one shared by another poet, this time from the 17th century in Japan. Basho, the poet himself, had a really distinct style of blending phrases of consecutive 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables in a really concise pattern, and then forming those together to create one big story. Now, this style is now in modern day called haiku, and it's a very common poetry style still in Japan and all over the world because of poets like him. Haiku is really defined by the standardized yet vastly different and unrhymed phrases that are all woven together into a collaborative story or a collaborative poem. I like to look at this as an analogy for what will happen in the Cardano blockchain when proof of stake and sharding come into the mix, when you have all these mini blockchains that all have their own sets of transactions, that all have their own rules to a certain extent, but they all have to play in perfect concert and tell the same story as all of the other sidechains in the network. They all have to collaborate effectively together, much like different phrases in a haiku have to work together to tell the whole story. This leads me to believe, without having any real confirmation from the Cardano team, that this was the inspiring analogy behind the name Basho in this case for this sidechain or sharding update or development sprint. So that's my opinion. If you guys think it's something else, let me know in the comments down below. That's my best guess about why the name Basho came to fruition. And finally, the last planned development milestone for Cardano is called Voltaire. And that kicked off in 2018. It's going to be a lot of work to implement this, and it's planned to continue through the span of 2020 and into 2021, again, in my humble opinion. Now, to the creators of Cardano and the community, this is seen as the final piece of the puzzle to bring Cardano across the finish line, if you will, basically out of the hands of IOHK, Charles Hoskinson, and the whole team behind Cardano and into the hands of the community 100%. Now, let's explain why that is. Voltaire, the update, is going to bring full support for the community to lead updates on the Cardano blockchain. Voltaire, the update, is going to bring the ability for the community to introduce, vote on, and fund improvement proposals and new development for their Cardano protocol in a digital democracy all by themselves. So you're not gonna have improvement proposals coming out of a core development team and then decided that that's gonna happen by the core development team and then no one else has a say. Digital democracy, everything will be introduced by the community and voted upon. Now, the voting itself will take place using the same framework that staking is used for in the Shelly protocol for node creation and staking pools, etc. So that's already going to be there. The whole concept here is that you have to also fund those proposals. So we have to figure out how to do that. To fund all of these improvement proposals, the idea is that a small percentage of all the transaction fees that happen on the network for transactions will get fed into a fund that will then be used for successfully voted upon improvement proposals. So in essence, you have a digital democracy and a digital treasury system built into the protocol that's not controlled by one party, it's controlled by the entire blockchain itself. It's a great idea, but it's really, really hard to implement. And I feel like this Voltaire update touches on the most grossly underestimated part of any blockchain ecosystem out there today, and that is governance. Deciding who's going to figure out and what the semantics are behind updates, behind funding updates, paying developers, paying people to participate and do important jobs on the network. There's no central authority to tell you what to do. So we have to create a system where governance takes into account all the things that go into it. How people react to things, how people are incentivized and disincentivized to do things. You have to think about it from all angles, and that's why governance is so challenging. So mark my words, the biggest part of the success of a blockchain network in the long term is going to be governance. It's one of the most important things to think about day one when you're developing a protocol. So this is going to be a huge update, and it's going to take some time to get right. But enough with that. This milestone is actually named after another person from history from the 1700s named Voltaire. Voltaire was a French writer from the 1700s who often wrote about topics like freedom of speech, freedom of expression and religion, and the separation of church and state. Voltaire himself is often referenced in modern literature for his constant focal point on reductionism and fact-based analysis in relation to politics, economy, and governance. So of course this makes perfect sense because this whole update is about governance, fact-based analysis, deciding what to do with the future of the Cardano blockchain when there are no central authorities to control everything. So Voltaire's writings, I'm sure, inspired many of the thinking sessions about what this update would look like. Again, this is the final development milestone, and I think that the technical specs are still in flux, but at least you have an understanding of what it's supposed to be about. Now I have to say, I love the tech behind Cardano, and I think they have a lot of potential. Not everything is in mainnet yet, and I understand that, but there are a lot of protocols out there that don't have everything out there quite yet. It's going to be a mad dash to Ethereum 2.0, to Cardano dropping Shelly and some of their other development updates. And a lot of these other projects are also following suit. But I find that the mythology behind Cardano, the team behind Cardano, is really inspiring. And to me, I love a good story and I love history. So the nomenclature behind all the updates and all the things, even the name Cardano itself, which is named after a famous mathematician, really make me happy and are just really interesting to talk about. And as a fun fact, writings by Voltaire actually drove me to start this channel. I'm a big fan of classic literature, and I focus a lot on breaking down complex topics into really clear and concise terms on this channel, and that really is derived from the idea of reductionism, which is a common theme in Voltaire's writing. So that's just a fun fact. Voltaire's writing is really cool. Now guys, I do ask that you please do not forget to hit that subscribe button, and do not forget to watch another one of my videos. I'll have one linked up right here and right here for you to watch. I genuinely appreciate the time you spend on this channel, guys, and I hope you enjoy this one. Cheers.